Hello and welcome. I'm Joanne Law, Director of Mediation Institute in Australia, and co-facilitating with me is Maina Migwi from Suluhu Mediation Centre in Kenya. We're doing a joint presentation on some of the basic mediation concepts of active listening and also a form of questioning called clean questioning. Before I go any further, as is tradition in Australia, I want to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of Australia and pay respects to elders past, present and future, recognising their continuing connections with the land, waters and cultures of this country. And I come from the lands of the Gunai Kurunai people in southeast of Victoria. So, Maina, it's probably a good idea if we just do a little introduction of who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those that I can see many that we've not met, my name is Maina Migwi, and I am the CEO of Suluhu Mediation Centre, and we have this great partnership with Mediation Institute. I'm happy today to host Joanne. Joanne is my mentor. We've worked together from the start of Suluhu up to today.
Yeah.
And so as you acknowledge your country, I also acknowledge my mentor here. And welcoming everyone to today's session, and really looking forward to the engagement today. I believe listening is a very key skill for mediators. So looking forward.
Absolutely. And because there are quite a lot of us, if you'd like to use the chat to introduce yourself, where you are, what you and anything you'd like to share about with the others that are here. And as you can see, we finally, after a number of years of working together, I managed to get to Kenya last year and met Maina and your wonderful family and some of your wonderful Suluhu family as well, which was a great privilege for me as well. So, as I said, please use the chat to introduce yourself and where you are and anything else that you'd like to share with others. What we've got on the agenda today is looking at active listening, and just very briefly, I do have a couple of resources that we're going to, and we'll be sharing the presentation for you as well. So the first thing we were talking about, and I found this on the internet, this diagram, there's someone that's putting on LinkedIn, really great, I think, little visual reminders. When we're listening as mediators, it's really important that we're listening to understand rather than listening and waiting for our turn to speak. And we know that our clients are usually going to be listening to respond. So they're not really wanting to understand the person because they think they're wrong and they're just waiting a chance to try and convince them of their point of view. I guess a really important part of our job is for us to use active listening, but also to help facilitate that for other people. So thinking about what that might mean is actively processing and seeking to understand the meaning and the intention behind what someone's saying, because we don't always express ourselves as well as we could. And particularly if people are in conflict, they're feeling upset, they may struggle to really express what they mean. And so sometimes we can't just take what's said at face value. We need to use our skills to try and draw out a little bit more of the meaning. So a couple of the key points that I thought might be important to remind ourselves is being fully present. So focusing on what the person's saying. We don't, as mediators, we don't need to keep a transcript. We don't need to have huge notes. If we're trying to write down everything they're saying, we're not really present and paying attention. Maybe we just write a couple of key words as we hear them, rather than getting lost in trying to record. And we've got to pay attention to everything. So the words only tell a little part of what's going on. So tone, body language, gestures, that should say. It's not a fancy new word that you haven't come across, it's just typo. And open-ended questions. So really being mindful. Something I often see with new mediators is that they forget to, when they're trying to make sure that they've understood what people are saying, they're asking questions that just shut down the conversation. Asking those questions as part, and then using our skills, our paraphrase, summaries and reflections. We're not trying to change anything. We're just trying to make sure we've understood. Maina or anyone else, did anyone have any other thoughts about active listening? Any little tips you've got?
I think what really is key here is being present, because you can't hear if you're not present. If you're busy writing, taking minutes, taking notes, you might lose a focus on your clients, and this would really interfere with your listening. So I think it's very key for us to be present and listen to our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And people can tell. They can really tell the difference when you're not really paying attention.
True.
And so I thought sometimes it's useful to see what the opposite is to, oh yes, Suresh, did you?
Yeah, regarding that last point about active listening, obviously the introduction part, how the mediator will interact with the parties and how comfortable he makes with the parties also makes influence. Apart from active listening, how the context you set before them and the rapport you build with the parties is also essential.
Yeah.
That is what I observed.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent contribution, and very much so, getting people to feel comfortable, to feel like they're in a safe space. As mediators, we often don't have a head at the table if we can. It's nice to have a round table and all sorts of, offering refreshments if you're doing things in person, or if you're online, just checking that everyone can see and hear, checking names, all of those little things that we can do just to put people at comfort. And then really listening. Yes, as part of our role when we're mediating is we've got to try and facilitate active listening between people that don't really want to listen to each other at all. And some of the ways that mediation's set up, it's about trying not to interrupt. Even though sometimes as mediators, we actually do have to interrupt because some people can want to talk for too long. So even though we are active listening, we still have to manage the process. So there's a trade-off. So in the pre-mediation, when we're preparing with people, maybe we're able to let them talk for longer and really get that initial rapport set up. I think that diagram helps to really understand the frame of mind that we come from, not thinking about judging what people are saying, but being curious. And if it's something that's very different to our own worldview, think, oh, well, how can they be thinking that? Or trying to understand more. That's a really good place for us to come from when we're doing active listening, or when we're trying to facilitate that for our clients. And of course, as mediators, we'd never be judging our clients, would we? No, not at all.
No.
We certainly try not to, because they know a lot more about their life and their situation than we ever will. And when we're active listening, we're not focusing on providing solutions or advice or things like that. That's not part of it. That's not, and again, don't get distracted. And also don't forget to check that you understand. So the other big danger that we have as mediators, apart from judgment, is assumptions. So assuming that you understand, because in your worldview, if you said that, that's what it would mean, but it might mean something quite differently for the other person. And again, when we're listening, don't use it to pivot to our own story. You might want to do that if you're at a party, but it still actually doesn't make you a very good listener if you do. We've all had experiences like that. You're trying to tell someone something and then they immediately say, oh, that reminds me of the time that I blah, blah, blah. So we definitely don't want to be doing that. Maina or anyone else, any thoughts about?
Yeah, I think also we need to be culture sensitive. Because we meet people who think differently from us. They've been brought up in different backgrounds. So we need to be sensitive to their way of doing things, and also the way they work around things. So we need to be sensitive to that. And just like the door here, we need to be open-minded, all right? We must remove those distractions which will interfere with our listening. And at the same time, I think it's also important for us to uphold the principles, like, for instance, self-determination, so that then we don't start coming up with solutions for them, start advising them. We must always wear the cap of a mediator. We don't start becoming motivational speakers or counselors or anything like that.
Absolutely. No, that's a very good reminder. And does anyone else have any thoughts? And again, feel free to use the chat as well. We know we want you to listen to us, but I do give you permission to, if you feel to add something into the chat. That was really just I guess a quick reminder about active listening to prepare us to talk a bit more about questionings. And
Joanne, before we move on, maybe I can I'm checking the chat here. I'm seeing from Wamboi Karengidi, listen to understand, not to speak.
Yes.
I'm also seeing Rebecca here. Sometimes I wonder if the mediator is scared of what the parties will say. Some across as controlling, and that is the shutdown, but completely understandable.
Yeah, very true, Rebecca. And I suppose it's an instinct that we have, but as the mediators, we control the room, the clients control the content. And it's not really up to us to control what they're going to say, except if they're going to get abusive or something. That's different. I think you're right. It's often worry about not being able to manage it. And so we want to shut them down. That's right, isn't it? Or we ask those leading questions, which is what we're going to talk about now. Anything else in the chat?
Nothing else in the chat. But you've mentioned about sometimes when the clients can be abusive or against the ground rules. I think it's also very important for us how we handle those transgressions, but then it doesn't interfere with their conversation, because we are there to facilitate. And again, how we enforce these ground rules may also end up being a barrier to our listening. We also need to be emotionally intelligent. Yes. And also really choose how we respond to that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, because if someone's, for example, got a trauma background and we come really harshly to enforce, that can cause a really bad reaction for that client. Yep, they can feel it. Did you have a comment, Martha? Or?
I'm seeing a comment here. I think it also really talks to what we've just been going through. One boy, mediator controls the rules and the parties, the conflict. So basically controlling the content, and the mediator controlling the process.
Absolutely. And Rebecca?
Yeah, I just wanted to put a request in for a webinar on trauma-informed mediation. Actually, I would love to see that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds quite something that we should really come up with.
Definitely, yeah. We did a couple of sessions not very long ago on grief, and when clients have got a lot of grief, which was really quite a thoughtful one that one of our members ran. I can share the link to that as well. But yes, trauma is a huge issue for many people.
There's something on the chart here.
Yeah.
Pamela, but one needs to take some notes even in active listening. It's a question.
Yeah, absolutely. But we want to try and make them as small as we can. For example, when we're in the party's opening statement, that statement's stage of the mediation, that's where we're really demonstrating active listening as the mediator. We usually want to just write a couple of key words that we think, okay, that might be an agenda item. We don't want to write big, long, full sentences, or that. At least that's my recommendation, to just keep it brief in that classic facilitative mediation. Often what I'll do is divide the page in two and put the people's names and just put the very basic concepts, keywords. And we'll talk a little bit more about keywords today. It's probably good to keep your microphone off unless you're speaking, because we've got quite a few people here, and it's wonderful to have so many of you here. We did do introductions right at the start, and we will have some more opportunity for discussion later on, but if you did miss out on hearing, either put your hand up like your little fake Zoom hand, or use the chat if you'd like to contribute to the discussion, and we can always stop. And so Maina's doing a very good job of monitoring that, so we're working as an excellent team here.
Yes, and maybe just a comment on the issue of taking notes. I think it's important for us to remember that the notes should really be capturing the issues. It should be different from taking minutes. You're not taking minutes of us. You're not taking minutes, but taking note of that which is important to your clients.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Yeah, it's different to another type of meeting that you need a full transcript or you need the detail of discussed. Ultimately, in mediation, because it's confidential unless they reach agreement, it's ephemeral, like it's just for now. Parties' opening statements, that's the most important time because we're wanting to form the agenda from those key concepts that they're raising. Hopefully that addressed that point. Are there any other points that?
Now, there's something here on the chat from Brenda. I also like dividing the page in two for each session. So I just take short key issues that are relevant for follow-up. Yeah, I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I do that too, Brenda. It makes it a lot easier. And it can match up. It makes it easier to talk about things in mutual terms when you start forming your agenda. Yeah, so wonderful. So with clean questions, it's part of the clean language technique, which comes from, it was developed by a psychologist and then used in neuro-linguistic programming. So it's used quite a bit, and the intention of clean language and clean questioning is not to put our bias in there. So it's really to invite clients to talk more about something, to extend what they've discussed without imposing assumptions or like that. And it can be used to uncover clients' meanings even when the clients and often people will use metaphors or other ways of speaking about their feelings that we need to uncover what they actually mean. I'll just do a couple of screens. The benefits of clean questioning is that it really encourages free expression. So when we're not using assumptions or leading questions, it means that people can answer in whatever way is appropriate for them. So it certainly complies with our obligations as mediators. So it's more ethical and helpful for us. It makes use of what's called semantic primes. Remember back in school, the prime numbers, the ones that can't be divided by anything other than themselves. They're basically just using the very basic little words that I suppose, are the minimal sort of thing that you can do for a question. And it really invites clients to self-examine. So our clean questions, our mediator questions, they focus them on somewhere or some when or somewhat about their understanding of an issue or whatever it is. So that's all very theoretical, but we're going to look at the really basic of what it is. What are the building blocks? So basically what we do is we link to something that's previously been expressed without being constrained or contaminated by our assumptions as the mediator or in whatever circumstance that we're using this type of language pattern. It doesn't reference the facilitator. So you're not including yourself in the question. You're not using, can you tell me about it? That's not a clean question. It might be valid in some places, but it's basically bringing it back to you. And we know as a mediator, we don't want to do that. And certainly if we're in the exploration stage where we're trying to get the parties speaking directly and they're having difficulties and we've got to interject, if we use something like, can you tell me about it? Or even if we say, tell the other party about it, it still constrains people. And we want to use the client's words exactly. So this is definitely a point where we'll note down the words that they've used. So we're not paraphrasing, because if we paraphrase, if we say what we think is the same thing with different words, it's actually going to be different words and it might have a completely different meaning for them. And when you see that, it can seem a little bit mechanical and not empathetic. So we don't want to use a whole lot of extra softening words though, but we can use our tone or we can use our body language if we're in person. We'll go to the example in a moment. What are the specific words or phrases that they've said that we're going to repeat back, direct the client's attention. So we start these sort of questions with an and then we ask our question. As an example, like a client might say, I don't trust him. So the key words there would be trust him.
So our clean question would be, and why don't you trust him? Or what don't you trust about him? So we're using those little words. Why, what, when don't you trust him? And that just lets the client go wherever they need to go. Another one that's common with neighbours. The sensor light's annoying. So the key word, the sensor light's annoying. And again, we're wanting to find out the easiest way is to use those 6 W's. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Kind of cheated, but it's got a W. So these are the little words that we're going to have some fun with. And then we just join them there. So the joining questions, we're using encourage the people to consider alternatives to their statement. And we all know what clients, they'll say something that's just like, they can't be trusted or they never do the right thing. Okay, so when don't they do the right thing or when do they do the right thing are both clean questions. That was a big brain dump. Maina, do you want to, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop into the chat.
Yeah, I think there's something here in the chat from Beth. In addition, use of non-verbal cues is an important aspect of listening.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Just bear with me a moment and I want to give you something. So with questioning, because that's one of the things you would have noticed when you first started training as mediators, I'm sure you might have got told, don't ask leading questions. It's the opposite of clean questions is leading questions where we assume the answer that we want. So what we're talking about is using questions that don't make any assumptions.
Talking of leading questions, really, again, also these may interfere with self-determination of your clients because you're already looking for predetermined answers.
Yeah. Yeah, at workplace mediation. So do you think that some more training might help? There's a lovely leading closed question.
Yeah, sure.
I haven't made a suggestion. Yeah, so the person might have said something like, oh, I just don't understand what's required of me anymore. And I might think, okay, what's my key word there? So maybe it's what's required. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I might say, when do you know what's required of you? So I might ask the opposite of what they've said, or saying, oh, so when did you know what was required? So I might go back to the past, but I'm not assuming what the answer is going to be. Or when do you think you will know what's required? I might go to the future. But yeah, if that makes sense. So I've dropped into the chat a little exercise that we're going to do in a moment. So for those of you that are on the phone, your partner might need to help you a little bit more. And if you're on a computer, then you might be able to open up the little activity document. What we're going to do is, so the client statement here is an example. I don't trust him. And you can use any of the W questions and see what sort of different results. So what about him don't you trust? When would you know you could trust him? So see how they're questions that are going to really, without you putting anything in there, they're going to really bring out some interesting information. And so it's a really useful way of trying to help progress. So we're going to have a little exercise. What I'm going to do, and hopefully you're able to stay a little bit longer because we've talked a little bit, but I'd like to break you out into groups of 2. There's actually a lot of you, so we might do groups of 3 and really just get someone to just start talking about something, nothing traumatic, just a typical thing a client might say to you. And the other person can be the mediator and just ask clean language questions. Who, what, when, where, how, why, with the keywords that you're hearing. And just have a couple of goes at that and then swap around. Does anyone have any questions about what I want you to do?
Sounds pretty clear. Unless others have questions, please feel free to ask questions so that we are clear on what you're going to do.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Let's have fun.
Yeah.
Let's enjoy what you're doing. and we learn at the same time.
Okay. And all right, so I'm going into 15 breakout rooms. So there'll be 2 or 3 participants per room. And basically, you'll have something pop up saying join breakout room. And when that pops up, just click on that and you'll go into a room with some random people, say hello, and then take some turns to have a little play with this language pattern. So I'm opening the rooms now, and we'll just, maybe use 10 minutes or something like that. So look for the keyword and then ask her when, where, how, why, or what question. Don't put anything else in around it, but use your nice tone and that sort of thing so that it doesn't sound confrontational. Or try without using a nice tone and see what it sounds like. So have some fun. So just click on join and go to your rooms. Okay, that's as much as we've got recorded. We went and did the exercise and people had so much fun that they asked for another round. Below the recording, you'll find a copy of the presentation, the slides, and also the little exercise. It might be something that you'd like to do as another exercise with your team or group, or just practice yourself. It's a really good questioning technique to be able to use in pretty much any circumstance. We'll plan another one of these joint sessions with Suluhu Mediation in the coming months, and we'll talk about a bit more of a serious topic of trauma-informed mediation.